I should have known something was wrong when Jovie started keeping her phone face down during dinner. My name is Mason Reddan, and I've been a building inspector in this Rust Belt Maine town for 8 years. Before that, I worked the mills like my father and his father before him. I know how to read signs, sagging beams, rotting foundations, structural problems that'll bring a whole house down if you ignore them long enough. That Tuesday night in October, sitting across from my wife of 6 years at our kitchen table, I saw all the warning signs I'd been ignoring. Jovie picked at her salad, barely touching the grilled chicken I'd made. Her phone buzzed against the wooden table, and she flipped it over quickly, but not quickly enough. "Work?" I asked, cutting into my own portion. "Just Melissa, complaining about her ex again." Jovie's voice had that tight quality it got when she was lying. After 6 years of marriage, you learn the tells. The phone buzzed again. This time she grabbed it, stood up, and walked toward the living room. "I should take this." I finished my dinner alone, listening to her muffled voice from the next room. The words were indistinct, but the tone was all wrong. Too soft, too intimate for a conversation with her girlfriend about relationship drama. When she came back 10 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed. "Everything okay?" I asked, loading dishes into the dishwasher. "Fine. Melissa's just going through a rough patch." She moved past me to grab a bottle of wine from the counter, avoiding eye contact. Later that night, while Jovie showered, her phone sat charging on the nightstand. I'd never been the type to snoop through my wife's messages, but something about her behavior had set off every alarm bell in my head. The phone lit up with a new text. From the angle where I sat on the bed, I could see the notification preview without even picking up the device. "Rowan, can't wait to see you tomorrow. He still doesn't suspect anything, does he?" My stomach dropped like I just stepped through a rotten floorboard. Rowan Carrick, owner of Carrick's auto shop on the other side of town. Big guy, all swagger and grease-stained hands. I'd known him peripherally for years. We'd gone to the same high school, though he was a few years ahead of me. Recently, he'd been showing up at more of the same social events Jovie and I attended. I stared at that message until the screen went dark, then sat there in the sudden silence, listening to the shower run and trying to process what I'd just seen. The bathroom door opened, and Jovie emerged in a cloud of steam, wrapped in her terry cloth robe. She looked relaxed for the first time all evening. "Hey," she said, settling onto her side of the bed. "You look tired." "Long day," I managed. "Had to inspect the old Morrison place. Foundation's completely shot." She made a sympathetic noise and reached for her phone. I watched her face as she saw Rowan's message, watched the small smile that crossed her lips before she quickly typed back a response. "I'm going to read for a bit," I said, grabbing the paperback thriller from my nightstand. But I couldn't concentrate on the words. Instead, I found myself studying my wife's profile as she scrolled through her phone, that same small smile playing around the corners of her mouth. Jovie was beautiful. I'd always known that. Auburn hair that caught the light just right, green eyes that could stop traffic when she put her mind to it. She worked in real estate, showing houses to young couples and retirees looking for their perfect home. She was good at it, too. Good at making people believe in possibilities, in fresh starts, and happy endings. I'd fallen for that same sales pitch 6 years ago. Now, watching her fingers move across her phone screen, I wondered how long she'd been selling me a story I was too stupid to see through. The next morning, Jovie left early for what she said was a breakfast meeting with a potential client. She kissed my cheek on her way out, the same quick peck she'd been giving me for months. "See you tonight," she said. I might be late, showing the Henderson house to some out-of-state buyers. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring at the spot where her phone had been the night before. Part of me wanted to dismiss what I'd seen, to find some innocent explanation for Rowan's message. But I'd been inspecting buildings long enough to know that when you see one crack in the foundation, there are usually a dozen more you haven't found yet. I called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and drove across town to Carrick's auto shop. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The shop sat on a corner lot, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. 3 garage bays, all open, with classic muscle cars in various states of restoration. Rowan's pride and joy was a 1967 Mustang Fastback, cherry red with racing stripes, parked in the spot closest to the office. I pulled into the customer parking area and watched through my windshield as Rowan emerged from under the hood of a Camaro. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the cocky grin that seemed permanently etched on his face. He was exactly the type of guy Jovie would find exciting. Everything I wasn't. Loud, flashy, the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching him work, trying to figure out what came next. Eventually, a customer showed up, and I left before Rowan could notice me. That afternoon, I drove to the Henderson house Jovie had mentioned. It was a sprawling colonial on the good side of town, with a for sale sign planted in the front yard. Jovie's silver Honda wasn't in the driveway. I parked across the street and waited. At 3:30, Jovie's car pulled up. She got out, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the front door. Alone. 10 minutes later, Rowan's black pickup truck turned the corner. I watched him park behind Jovie's car, watched him walk up the same path she'd taken, watched the front door open before he could knock. They disappeared inside together. I sat there for 2 hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When they finally emerged, Jovie looked disheveled despite her attempts to straighten her clothes. Rowan's shirt was untucked. They stood by their cars for a few minutes, talking in low voices. At one point, Rowan reached out and touched Jovie's face, a gesture so intimate it made my chest tighten with something between rage and heartbreak. Then they drove away in opposite directions, and I was left sitting alone on an empty street, staring at a house that wasn't for sale to anyone but suckers like me. That night, Jovie came home with takeout Chinese food and a story about difficult clients who'd kept her running around all afternoon. "How was your day?" she asked, settling across from me at the kitchen table. "Productive," I said. "Fixed a few things that needed fixing." She smiled and opened her container of lo mein. "That's my handy husband." I watched her eat, watched her check her phone between bites, watched her lie to my face with the same ease she used to close real estate deals. "Jovie," I said finally, "we need to talk." She looked up, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "About what?" "About Rowan Carrick." The chopsticks stopped moving. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something like panic flash across her face. Then she recovered, setting down her food and giving me a confused look. "Rowan? What about him?" "I saw you today, at the Henderson house." She blinked once, twice. Then she laughed, a sound that didn't quite ring true. "Mason, what are you talking about? I was showing houses all afternoon. I told you that." "I was there, Jovie. I saw his truck. I saw both of you go inside." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Jovie's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, defiance. "Are you following me now?" she asked finally. "That's what we've come to? Are you sleeping with him?" Another laugh, sharper this time. "You're being ridiculous." "Then explain what I saw." "Rowan's looking for a house," she said, her voice taking on that patient tone she used with difficult clients. "He called this morning asking if I had anything in his price range. I told him about the Henderson place." "Funny how you didn't mention that when you left this morning." "Because it wasn't planned. He called while I was already out." She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "Mason, honey, you're scaring me a little. This jealousy isn't like you." But I pulled my hand away. "Show me your phone." "What?" "If there's nothing going on, show me your phone. Let me see your messages with him." Her face hardened. "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because I'm not going to be treated like a criminal in my own home. Because I have a right to privacy. Because this is insane." She stood up, gathering her purse and jacket. "I'm going to stay at my sister's tonight. When you are ready to apologize for this ridiculous accusation, you know where to find me." 5 minutes later, I was alone in the house, surrounded by the debris of our Chinese takeout and the wreckage of my marriage. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen, trying to figure out my next move. By morning, I had a plan. The Blue Hour was the kind of bar where mill workers and mechanics went to forget their troubles, dark wood, dim lighting, and a bartender named Eddie who'd heard every sob story in town at least twice. I'd been coming here since I was 21, first with my father, then with my work buddies, and lately by myself. I pushed through the heavy door at 6:30 on a Thursday evening, nodding to the regulars scattered along the bar. Eddie looked up from the glass he was polishing. "Mason, haven't seen you in a while." "Been busy," I said, settling onto my usual stool. "Whiskey? Neat." He poured without comment, sliding the glass across the scarred wooden bar. The amber liquid burned going down, but it was a good burn, clean and honest. "Jovie still at her sister's?" Eddie asked. I looked up, surprised. "How'd you know about that?" "Small town, brother. Word gets around." He leaned against the bar, lowering his voice. "Cleo mentioned it when she was in yesterday." Cleo Marver, my cousin and Jovie's best friend since high school. If anyone knew what was really going on, it would be her. "She say anything else?" Eddie shrugged. "Just that you two were having some problems. Sorry to hear it." I took another sip of whiskey, feeling it spread warmth through my chest. Yeah, well, sometimes problems have a way of solving themselves. The door opened behind me, letting in a gust of cold October air. I glanced in the mirror behind the bar and felt my stomach clench. Rowan Carrick stood in the doorway, scanning the room. When his eyes found mine in the mirror, he hesitated for just a moment. Then he walked over, sliding onto the stool next to mine like we were old friends. "Mason," he said, nodding to Eddie. "Beer, whatever's on tap." "Rowan." I kept my voice neutral, professional. We sat in silence while Eddie poured Rowan's beer. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I wasn't about to be the first one to break. Finally, Rowan cleared his throat. "Heard you and Jovie are going through a rough patch." I turned to face him fully. "Did you now? Where'd you hear that?" "Around." He took a long pull from his beer. "Small town. You know how it is." "I do know how it is," I said. "I also know how some people like to take advantage of other people's problems." His jaw tightened. "Not sure what you're getting at." "I think you know exactly what I'm getting at." The bar had gone quiet around us. Even the regulars could sense the electricity in the air. Rowan set down his beer and turned to face me. "Look, Mason, I don't want any trouble." "Funny thing about trouble," I said. "Sometimes it finds you whether you want it or not." "Are you threatening me?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Just making conversation. Same as you." Eddie cleared his throat. "Maybe you boys should take this outside." But Rowan was already standing, throwing a $5 bill on the bar. "I was just leaving anyway." He headed for the door, then stopped and looked back. "Mason? Sometimes when marriages fall apart, it's nobody's fault but the people in them." After he left, the bar slowly returned to its normal volume. Eddie refilled my glass without being asked. "You okay?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. I stayed for 2 more drinks, listening to the conversations around me, picking up fragments of gossip and speculation. By the time I left, I had a clearer picture of just how much the town knew about my situation. The answer was more than I'd thought. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse and filed for a legal separation. It was a preliminary step, but it would give me access to certain resources I might need later. Then I went to see my cousin Cleo. She lived in a farmhouse on the outskirts of town, the same place where we'd spent summers as kids. Cleo worked as a nurse at the regional medical center, and she had a reputation for being both compassionate and brutally honest. I found her in her kitchen, still in scrubs from the night shift. "Well, well," she said, looking up from her coffee, "if it isn't the talk of the town." "That bad, huh? Sit down, Mason. We need to talk." I took a seat at her kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten countless bowls of cereal during those long-ago summers. "How long have you known?" I asked. Cleo sighed. "About Jovie and Rowan? A few months. I kept hoping it would burn itself out." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hoped I was wrong. Because I didn't want to be the one to blow up your marriage. Because I'm an idiot." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Mason. I should have said something." "What do you know about it?" "Not much. They've been careful. But Jovie's been different lately. Happier, but in a way that didn't include you. And Rowan's been throwing money around town like he won the lottery." That last part caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "New truck, expensive dinners at the steakhouse, talking about expanding his shop. Either his business is doing better than anyone thought, or he's got another source of income." I filed that information away for later consideration. "There's something else," Cleo said. "Something you need to know before you make any decisions about what comes next." The tone of her voice made my stomach drop. "What?" "Jovie's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what she'd just said. "How do you know?" "She came to the clinic last week. I wasn't her nurse, but I saw her name on the schedule. Prenatal appointment." "She hasn't told me." "I figured as much." Cleo's face was grim. "Mason, given the timing, there's a good chance the baby isn't yours?" I stared out her kitchen window at the bare trees in her backyard, my mind racing through possibilities and implications. "What are you going to do?" Cleo asked. I stood up, suddenly needing to move, to act, to do something other than sit still with this new knowledge burning in my chest. "I'm going to find out the truth," I said. "All of it." That evening, I was waiting in my living room when Jovie finally came home. She walked through the front door like she owned the place, which I suppose she did, legally speaking. "Mason," she said, setting down her purse, "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk." "Yes, we do." She settled into the armchair across from me, crossing her legs and smoothing her skirt. Even now, even knowing what I knew, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she looked. "I've been thinking about what happened the other night," she began. "Your accusations, your jealousy. I think we both said things we didn't mean. Did we? I'm willing to forgive you for following me, for not trusting me, but we need to establish some boundaries going forward. I almost laughed. She was good, I had to give her that. Even caught red-handed, she was trying to flip the script, make me the villain in her story. Before we talk about boundaries, I said, I think you have something to tell me. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Such as? You're pregnant. The color drained from her cheeks. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked that I knew. How did you? She started, then caught herself. Yes, I am. I was going to tell you tonight. Were you? Or were you going to wait until you figured out how to spin it? Spin it? Mason, what's wrong with you? This is our baby we're talking about. Is it? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. Of course it is, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Prove it. What? Prove it's mine. Take a paternity test. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. I can't believe you're asking me to do that. I can't believe I have to ask. This is insane, Mason. You're being paranoid and cruel. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'm being realistic. She spun around to face me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw real fear in her eyes. I won't do it, she said. I won't subject myself or our baby to that kind of humiliation. Then I guess we have our answer. You're making a mistake, she said. You're throwing away our marriage over some ridiculous suspicion. I'm not throwing away anything, Jovie. I'm just finally seeing what was already broken. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her cycle through different approaches. Tears, anger, pleading. Finally, she settled on cold calculation. Fine, she said. You want to play it this way? We'll play it this way, but don't expect me to make this easy for you. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? To get a lawyer, she called over her shoulder. If you want a war, Mason, you'll get one. After she left, I sat alone in the gathering darkness, listening to the house settle around me. Part of me felt relief. The waiting was over, the pretending was done, but mostly I felt empty, hollowed out like an old building after the wrecking ball has done its work. I poured myself a drink and started making plans. The next morning, I called in another sick day and drove to the county seat. If Jovie wanted to lawyer up, I needed to be ready. The law office of Patricia Hendricks occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian downtown. Patricia was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for not taking prisoners in divorce court. Mr. Reddan, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Tell me about your situation. I laid out everything, the affair, the pregnancy, Jovie's refusal to take a paternity test. Patricia took notes, asking pointed questions about assets, income, and timeline. The good news, she said when I finished, is that Maine allows for court-ordered paternity testing in cases like this. The bad news is that it could take months to get a hearing. What about in the meantime? In the meantime, you protect yourself. Document everything. Don't do anything stupid. And don't let her or her lover provoke you into doing something you'll regret. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a list of things to avoid. But as I drove home through the gray October afternoon, I found myself thinking less about legal strategy and more about justice. The law was one thing, but sometimes a man had to find his own way to make things right. That evening, I went back to the Blue Hour. The same regulars occupied their usual spots, nursing beers and watching the game on the TV above the bar. Eddie nodded as I took my seat. How are you holding up? One day at a time, I said. He poured my whiskey without being asked. For what it's worth, most folks in town are on your side. Most folks? Well, Rowan's got his supporters, but they're mostly the type who'd side with anyone willing to buy them around. I thought about that as I sipped my drink. In a town this size, reputation mattered. People remembered who stood by their word and who didn't. Eddie, I said, you ever hear anything about Rowan's business? How he's doing financially? Eddie glanced around, then leaned closer. Funny you should ask. Word is he's been spending like he's got money to burn. New equipment, fancy dinners, talking about buying property. His shop doing that well? Not from what I hear. Most folks take their cars to Jimmy's place on the other side of town. Better prices, honest work. Another piece of the puzzle. I filed it away with the rest. I was finishing my second drink when my phone buzzed with a text message. From Jovie. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Henderson House, come alone. I stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. The Henderson House, scene of their afternoon rendezvous. Was this her idea of a power play? I typed back, I'll be there. Whatever game she wanted to play, I was ready. The Henderson house looked different in the cold light of a gray Saturday afternoon. Less inviting, more like what it really was, an empty shell waiting for someone to breathe life into it. I parked across the street, the same spot where I'd waited 2 weeks earlier. This time, I wasn't hiding. Jovie's Honda was already in the driveway. I checked my watch. Exactly 2 o'clock. Whatever else you could say about my wife, she was punctual. I crossed the street and walked up the front path. The door opened before I could knock. "Mason," Jovie said. She looked tired, older somehow. The stress was showing around her eyes. "Jovie." She stepped aside to let me in. The house was staged with rental furniture, generic pieces designed to help potential buyers imagine their own lives playing out in these rooms. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading me into the living room. "You said we needed to talk." "We do." She gestured to the couch. "Please sit." I remained standing. "I'm fine here." She sighed and took a seat in the armchair across from me. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about what you asked me to do." "And?" "I'll take the test." I felt a flicker of surprise. "You will?" "But I have conditions." Of course she did. "I want a written agreement that if the baby is yours, when the baby is yours, you'll drop this ridiculous divorce proceeding and we'll go to counseling." "That's not going to happen." "Then we have nothing to discuss." I studied her face, looking for tells, for signs of the game she was really playing. "Why the sudden change of heart?" I asked. "Because I love you," she said. "Because I want to save our marriage. Because I'm tired of fighting." "And because you're confident the baby is mine." She met my eyes steadily. "Yes, I am." I walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd sat in my truck 2 weeks ago, watching my world fall apart. "What about Rowan? What about him? Is he part of this deal? Do I pretend I never saw you together, never saw his messages?" "There's nothing between Rowan and me," she said. "There never was. You misunderstood what you saw." I turned back to face her. "I misunderstood you and him going into this house together. I misunderstood him touching your face in the driveway. He was consoling me. I'd been crying about our problems, and he was being a friend." "A friend?" "Yes." I almost admired her commitment to the lie. Even now, even caught, she was sticking to her story. "Show me your phone," I said. "What?" "Right now. Show me your messages with Rowan. If there's nothing between you, prove it." She hesitated for just a moment. "I deleted them." "Why?" "Because I didn't want you getting the wrong idea. They were innocent, but I knew how you'd interpret them." "How convenient." "Mason, please, I'm trying to make this right." But I was done listening. I walked toward the front door. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "When you're ready to tell me the truth, the whole truth, you know where to find me." "The truth is that I love you," she called after me. "The truth is that we can fix this if you'll just trust me." I paused at the door. "The truth, Jovie, is that you're scared. You're scared because your plan is falling apart and you're running out of options." I left her sitting in that empty house, surrounded by furniture that belonged to someone else, just like the life she'd been trying to build. That night, I called Cleo. "How did it go?" she asked. "About like you'd expect. She's willing to take the paternity test now, but only if I agree to stay married to her when it proves the baby is mine." "Confident, isn't she?" "Too confident, like she knows something I don't." There was a pause. "Mason, there's something I need to tell you, something I probably should have mentioned yesterday." My stomach tightened. "What?" "The timing of Jovie's pregnancy. It's right on the edge. If she got pregnant 8 weeks ago, it could be yours. If it was 9 or 10 weeks ago, probably not." "So she's gambling that the timing will be close enough to create reasonable doubt." "That's what I'm thinking." I thanked Cleo and hung up, then sat in my kitchen, staring at the calendar on the wall. 8 weeks ago, Jovie and I had been intimate exactly twice, once on a Sunday morning, once on a Thursday night. I remembered because it had been so rare lately. 9 weeks ago, I'd been out of town for 3 days, inspecting flood damage in a neighboring county. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I still needed more evidence. The next morning, I drove to Carrick's auto shop. Rowan was alone in the garage, bent over the engine of a classic Camaro. His prized Mustang sat in its usual spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I walked through the open bay door without announcing myself. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, wrench in hand, and for a moment I saw something like fear flicker across his face. "Mason, what can I do for you? You can start by telling me the truth about you and my wife." He straightened slowly, setting the wrench down on his workbench. "I told you the other night. You told me a lot of things, none of them true. Look, I don't want any trouble. Too late for that? We faced each other across the concrete floor, two men who'd reached the end of civil conversation. She's pregnant, I said. His face went white. What? Jovie. She's pregnant. Funny thing is, she seems pretty confident the baby is mine, even though she's been spending her afternoons in empty houses with you. Mason, I swear, we never what? Never thought you'd get caught? Never thought I'd find out? It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He glanced toward the office, as if checking to make sure we were alone. Okay. Yes, and Jovie and I, we've been seeing each other, but it's not serious. It's just physical. How long? A few months. How many months? I don't know. 3, maybe 4. And the baby? I don't know about any baby. She never told me she was pregnant. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. He seemed genuinely shocked by the news. What's your end game here, Rowan? You planning to leave your wife for mine? I'm not married. Girlfriend, then. Whatever. You planning to run away together? No, nothing like that. It's just fun, you know? Fun. My marriage, my life, reduced to entertainment for a man who couldn't be bothered to find his own woman. Well, the fun's over, I said. Look, Mason, I'm sorry, I really am. But Jovie, she came on to me. I didn't chase her. That's supposed to make me feel better? I'm just saying, your problems with her started long before I came along. He was probably right about that, but I wasn't in the mood to be reasonable. Stay away from her, I said. Stay away from my wife, stay away from my house, stay away from me. And if I don't? I stepped closer, close enough to smell the motor oil and cigarettes on his clothes. Then you and I will have a different kind of conversation. You threatening me? I'm educating you about boundaries, about consequences, about what happens when you mess with another man's family. I turned and walked toward my truck, but his voice stopped me. Mason, for what it's worth, I hope the baby's yours. I really do. I looked back at him. Why? Because if it's not, you're going to have a lot bigger problems than just a cheating wife. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rowan's words, about the implications of what he'd said. If the baby wasn't mine, what then? Would Jovie expect me to raise another man's child? Would she try to pass it off as mine indefinitely? I got up and went to my computer, researching paternity laws, custody rights, financial obligations. The more I read, the angrier I became. By dawn, I had a plan. I called Patricia Hendricks's emergency number. I need to file for an immediate court order, I told her. I want a paternity test done as soon as medically safe, and I want it done through the court system, not some private lab Jovie can manipulate. That's going to be expensive, Patricia warned, and it's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. I just want it to be honest. 3 days later, Jovie was served with papers at her real estate office. According to Cleo, who heard it from her friend who worked at the bank next door, Jovie screamed at the process server loud enough for half the building to hear. That afternoon, my phone rang. You bastard, Jovie said without preamble. How dare you humiliate me like that? You humiliated yourself, I replied. I'm just making it official. I'm going to destroy you in court. I'm going to take everything you have. Good luck with that. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've got it all figured out? I think I've got enough figured out. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Mason. No idea what I'm capable of. The line went quiet, and for a moment I thought she'd hung up. Jovie? I'm pregnant with your baby, she said, her voice suddenly calm. And I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man abandons his pregnant wife. This time, she did hang up. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, wondering what I'd just unleashed. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in town, my wife was planning her next move in a game I was only beginning to understand. The court date was set for 3 weeks away. Until then, all I could do was wait and watch, and hope that the truth would be enough to set me free. But as I'd learned over the past month, the truth was a slippery thing in a small town where everyone had secrets and no one wanted to be the first to tell them.